let me welcome my guests who are here. We are talking about the ECA Director, Mr. Keston Nancoo, and the CEO of the ECA, Joycelyn Opadeyi. Let me start by saying ladies first, as you would expect. Joycelyn, a very good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, Rennie. Thank you so much for having us this morning on your program.
It is always good to have you here. My friend Nancoo, how are you, Keith?
Very, very good.
That is a get back for Ronnie. that is a little inside joke. It is good to see both of you all here this morning. Just our listeners, just that you be clear, the ECA, as aforementioned, is a non-profit organization, advocates for employers' rights in Trinidad and Tobago by speaking out on issues affecting the employer community. In difficult times, I say to you, the challenge is always a very difficult one, balancing and adjusting to a lower source of revenue while competing a whole lot more. Now, this is compounded or made more difficult because you have to do that juggling act of motivating employees facing increased prices for goods and services to produce more. And sometimes they have to do this on frozen wages or tempering, at best, their expectation for salary increases. That is a big job. The ECA, looking at this situation, is hosting a national symposium November 11th this year and January 27th next year, with a focus on strengthening the capacity of employers in light of the economics and changing industrial relations climate. The conference theme is Retooling Organizations for the Future. Let me start with you, Keston. First question is, what will these symposia entail?
Well, what it would entail is bringing on the strategic level, having strategic conversation about some very important HR topics. For example, this is a forum that will enable and allow leaders, HR leaders, CEOs, other enthusiasts in the industry to come and witness firsthand, because we do have some very experienced presenters who have demonstrated their ability in terms of breadth and depth in the topics that we are going to be talking about. For example, we have like Mariano Brown, who is well known for not just his intellect and his understanding of economic issues, but I think what is so important is that he is able to relate, take that conversation to every single strata in the society, particularly the man in the street. And I think that is one of the selling propositions as it relates to this retooling symposium.
And if I could just add
Please.
to what Mr. Nancoo just said, the ECA gets a very important part of its mandate from its association and its recognition by the ILO. The ILO is in fact partnering with us in this symposium, and one of the very important aspects of that is what is going to the information that is going to be shared, because the ILO is funding research. So what you're going to be getting at this symposium is actual research. We have the noted Dr. Andre Vincent Henry. He has been commissioned to do this study and the research, and therefore that information is going to be shared, and persons would have, of course, the opportunity to respond and react and to some of that information. And at the end of the day, one of the ECA's role, very important, is advocating on behalf of its membership. And therefore, when all of that information comes together and the discussion takes place, then we're talking about advocating, presenting the information at the higher level, at the tripartite body, so that we can have the conversation. And I think that is the very important role that the ECA has to play. We will talk about it a little later on, but the industrial relations climate,
yes.
we understand where it's going. We see where it's going, and we feel as the leading body, employer body in Trinidad and Tobago, we have to have the conversations. We have to get the relevant parties together. Actually, at the symposium, we're going to have the union representing and presenting their view as well. So it's going to be, we're saying, guys, this thing is not where it should be. Let's come together to the table and let's talk about it.
It's all about getting the stakeholders involved. And this November 11th is the first one. January 27th is the second one. That voice you just heard is that of the CEO, Joycelyn Opadeyi, and I'm also in company with the ECA director, Keston Nancoo. Other folks who are attending this will be regular guests here at Brunch. David Abdullah, he will be speaking. The Honorable Paula Gopi Schoon will be there. Mr. Shingo Miyaki, right? He's from the ILO, and Lennox Marcel will also be there.
Yes, and that is really to give the broad context.
The stakeholders, all
the stakeholders. Yes. You cannot deal with a problem unless you pull it apart in all the various constituents.
For folks to understand the depth of this situation and what you're trying to do at this symposium, they have to realize the recent statistics published by the World Economic Forum in their 2016-17 Global Competitiveness Report shows Trinidad and Tobago ranked 137th out of 138 countries in terms of cooperation in labor-employer relations. That is frightening. Let me ask either of you. I think I'll send this at Keston quickly. What is responsible, would you say, for this unsustainable, strained relationship, and how does one bridge the gap?
Okay, Rennie, and I know I have it right.
You got it.
Rennie. Yeah, well, this has been going on for quite a while, and I think culture is one of the drivers where we have come from. But if you fast forward, and I know a lot of writers have been talking about it, more importantly, Dr. Terence Farrell, and all the rest of it. But from the ECA's perspective, the time has come for parties to the tripartite conversation to begin to move away from it. For example, there is a need for greater levels of collaboration, cooperation, and consensus building. Now, to add to that, the tripartite conversation, in my mind, should in fact be engaged in talking about concessions. Because at the end of the day, what you're talking about, we are operating the reality. The harsh reality is that parties to the tripartite conversation need to start talking about what am I prepared to give up.
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
Indeed.
And this is not a joke. This is serious. Okay? And again, the ECA has been writing about this. I remember in my stint as the chairman, I have papers that would have been written over and over. And I am still of the belief that now that the platform is burning in terms of change management language, this is the time. Otherwise, we are doomed. And let me just go on, as you said, you posed the question, what can we do about it? Well, this has to do with a renewed commitment to a sense of purpose. That's one. Broadening the views and perspectives of each other's interests about the future. And I think more than anything else, parties need to demonstrate or begin to demonstrate the will and the commitment to overcome adversarial histories. Now, let me hasten to add, that is going to require a reconstructing the relationships on a different foundation. But if we are serious, and for example, our theme for this year, the ECA's theme, is building our common future together, renewed collective action for a better quality of life. The government, the Minister of Finance in his budget speech, the theme for that presentation was shaping a brighter future, a blueprint for transformation. So pretty much we are all on the same page. And if we are on the same page and we believe this, and this is where we want to get to, that's the future state, therefore we need to adopt and adapt what I have just articulated. And I don't think this nonsense about, well, we got to continue with positional bargaining and we're going to be fighting each other. This time, I think it's very clear that there will be no winners.
There is a point you made that we discussed the last time you were here, and that's why I'm encouraged that you've taken the approach that we are dealing with concession discussions, because your task is an unenviable one, and I'll tell you why. Regularly, it's difficult to get people to condition their expectations and or their projections in the case of the workers and the employer respectively. You are asking now the employers in a tough climate where things are a little more difficult revenue-wise to be prepared to give something. You're asking the workers at times where prices are going up to expect a little less. You are asking all the stakeholders to give in a lot more. And like I said, it is an unenviable task, but I admire and salute the ECA for doing it. The follow-up question is, how is the ECA working to get employers more willing to spend money on training and putting country first? Now, this is the same thing asked of workers, but that's always asked of workers. I want to just deal with the employers, which is the people you represent.
Yeah.
How do you work with them to get them to understand at a time where revenue is a lot less from sales, et cetera, and now you say put some money inside of there for the long picture, for the future of Trinidad and Tobago? That is a very difficult task. I don't know who wants to take that.
Well, if I may jump in here, it's not difficult. Again, it's not difficult. I have come from the trade union movement, okay? So I understand the entire spectrum, okay? So when we talk about bringing a balance, I think a lot of it has to do with what are the enabling factors that can stimulate levels of engagement that will get parties to the table. And that's why I've spoken about putting aside or reconstructing the conversation on a different foundation. We got to draw the line in the sand, all parties, okay? So it's no longer about fooling. It is about trust. It is about trust. This is about rebuilding relationships, because we are not talking about this generation, but what about the upcoming generation and the generation yet unborn? What are we leaving for them?
But you are asking for the unselfish approach, which hitherto we have not seen. And that's why I said I'm not a pessimist at all. I always believe the glass is half full. However, for those who have either their shareholders and or their personal projections to satisfy, we have not seen a willingness before to do this, and this is going to be rather prohibitive, Joycelyn. That's what I'm asking.
I understand what you're saying, Rennie. I think that's why previously, I think the ECA might have gone into a little quiet mode, and this symposium is where we are saying to employers, guys, we need to take the bull by the horn. What we have planned as well is a number of like breakfast sessions where we are going to be bringing our employers in. We're going to be talking about the issues and looking at the statistics. I think a lot of times we talk, just off the top of our head. What we are doing now, actually, the EC is a lot more research. We have just strengthened our research team because we know we need to. Employers they're not easily convinced, and therefore you have to show them the impact, and you have to show them, what it's looking like, the big picture, and that's the approach that we're going to be taking, showing them, bombarding them with the numbers, bringing them in as well for training in relevant areas, because at the end of the day, they want to see the benefit to them. At the end of the day, they're in business. They want to make, the profits and so. And therefore, we have to speak their language. And that's what the ECA is sort of reorganizing itself and retooling. The same retooling that we're talking and we're sharing here and we'll be sharing at the symposium. We are doing that within our own organization because we recognize that we have to be a little more relevant to the employer, at least try to reach them where they are at.
Before Keston chimes in here, just to remind listeners, the Retooling Organizations for the Future Symposium, the first one is November 11th. It takes place at the Hyatt Regency, and the second one is for January 27th, 2017. 17. And these are two. This is a thing that we need, Keston, because of your history and your time with trade unions. It is one thing to get the employers in that place. It's going to be another thing to get the unions to start to listen to that sort of talk, because many argue that they have been holding the strain and doing the bigger part of the contribution to nation building than anybody else. How do you get them around to this conversation?
Sure. Again, it has to do with, I keep repeating, parties got to be willing to trust. Unfortunately, and I myself have experience in my previous life where, as part of the union, we actually entered into a moratorium, gave up cost items for 3 years. And when the time came, when things went up, became good once again, there was a turning back, So I know that there's evidence of that. But let me just jump in a bit, if I may, to talk about the knowledge and investment and training. Any sensible employer during a recessionary period, this is the time that you got to invest in the development of your people.
Yes.
And we are going through a complete revolution right now in terms of the world of work and the quality of people and the level of preparedness of those persons who are going to be employees in the new dispensation. One of the things we have been talking about, one of the conversations has to do with ICT. People becoming more innovative.
Explain ICT for me.
That's come on.
Communications.
Information communication
And
technology.
Okay,
Sorry.
good. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure our listeners are staying along with us on this.
Information communication technology. Now that's a big area. Now what we are being called upon to do is more with less. Okay, so you have things like the introduction of robotics.
Yes.
So the world is speeding ahead in terms of introducing technology at a fast rate, and so it's necessary for employers, if nothing else, to recognize the need to continue to invest in those areas in order to be competitive or even to have a chance in terms of sustainability, in terms of the future growth and development of their businesses.
Recognition of the axiom: if you continue doing the same thing, that's the epitome of madness and expect a different result. So at some point, you've got to stop doing that. As we mentioned before, it is woeful also that Trinidad and Tobago ranked very low in the latest global competitiveness report. This is the question of productivity. Productivity is very bad. And my question to you, Keston or Joycelyn, is this: are we looking at a compensation issue, an incentive issue, an issue of just plain laziness, dishonesty, or a culture of give the least and get the most in return? This is the cultural part we have to look at. Are we looking at a combination of all, any specific one? What?
It is all of the above. All of the above, I would say. And again, that situation, why we are where we are, in the context of all of the above, as you have just articulated, that brings us back to the need for the tripartite conversation to commit itself. I mean, what keeps coming up in my mind is, if we don't decide to take positive action today, what is going to happen is purely based on selfishness rather than selflessness, and thinking about that future.
I did not take my coffee this morning. Sometimes I'm a little slow when I don't do the coffee, because all that I articulated, all about the workers, all that we spoke about with the employers, nothing new.
Yeah.
This has been in the air and the corridors. We are like an echo chamber with these issues. We all hear them. How do we get them all to turn the table? You understand what I'm saying?
Sure.
On the one hand, I hear everything you both are saying, but we have heard this before. I mean, what is this? Almost like a firing squad, a circular firing squad. Folks are in the middle. They are aware of the danger of the selfishness. They are aware of the danger of the low productivity, but nothing has moved them off the dime yet.
One of the things before Joycelyn jumps in, statistical information is critical.
Yes.
Because when you're talking about change, which is what we are talking about here, one of the first drivers in a change process is to speak to the why. And the why of the change must be informed by statistical information that people can feel and touch. We now have, so it will require, to answer your question, it will require that information, the presentation of that information in terms of how critical. So the Minister of Finance and the Honorable Prime Minister and other people could be talking about how bad the economy is. So, but in layman's term,
if it's not reaching, it's not working.
Precisely. So they're going to be able to feel and touch. That's the only way people tend to respond to change, if you want them to change.
I remember a conversation with Joycelyn some time ago in which she spoke about the need to represent the interest of workers to employers, so they understand what is the basic foundation. If the employer does not care about the employee's interest, the employee is not going to care about the employer's profits. At the end of the day, that is what we're coming down to. I am going to keep the optimistic cap with you. Sure. I am going to look at the retooling. I'm looking at the information coming forward. There is something to be said for folks understanding. I'm hoping your panel is able to do that, to bring what you were saying that makes the world of sense, but bring it to them in a way that they understand this is survival. Yeah. At the end of the day, this is survival. Joycelyn, I'm going to redirect this one to you in case you just locked into us on Brunch this morning. 22 minutes after 10 o'clock. It's a very hot morning, 32 degrees. My guests are Joycelyn Opadeyi, who is the CEO of the Employers Consultative Association, and Mr. Keston Nancoo, who is the ECA Director. The ECA underscores that the safety and security of employees should never be placed in a position of compromise. This is a basic tenet of the employment relationship and good industrial relationship practice that prudent employers should always maintain, that I have heard you articulate before. However, the ECA condemns the recent strike action by the OWTU and its members as irresponsible and a danger to the nation's current recovery and developmental efforts. Now, I framed that like that, and I'm going to throw this across to Keston. I framed it like that because the OWTU, who we will have on later on, Mr. Ozzy Warwick will join us, they say it's a question of security that is compounded by a demand for settlement of wages, but we leave that alone. So they are saying this is a question of safety. If someone can come from off the street, scale the fences, get on top of an oil tank, throw himself in the center of it, this is safety, not just as it stands. It is a danger to the other employees because anyone else can come in and do the same thing. So there is credence in what they are saying. My question is, why is the ECA condemning the strike action?
Okay, let me just put that in context because I know my comrades would be listening. So I want to make it absolutely clear. The guy breaching or getting into the tank, the ECA condemns that. There is no way, by no stretch of imagination, that someone should be allowed to breach, because it could have been worse. This guy could have gone in there with a match, okay, and then we would have had nothing.
Yes.
Today we would have been talking a different So we totally agree that ensuring that the security is maintained, especially in that environment. But let me move one step forward. I am a bit surprised, which is what influenced the comment about the irresponsible behavior. Okay, in terms of the action. The union must know that you cannot just call for a man's head just like that. Due process has to take place. And what, in my opinion, the employer is doing is ensuring that that process is maintained. You protect that process, which the unions have fought for over the years. You know, the Butler, the George Weeks, you know, the McLeods of this world. So to come now and want to call for this man's head, and as a result of that, to take industrial action, that is the specific reason why we have described the action as irresponsible. And just to add further, we all know in industrial relations, a man's job is his property. Is his property. You cannot just take away a man's property just like that.
Just that our listeners are very clear. The property you're talking about is that of Mr. Richards, who is the chief security
That's correct.
officer, right?
His job.
Okay.
You know, so due process must take place. As I often say, even if you see someone with their hands in the kitty taking money out, you got to take the time, although you know that this person should be fired, due process must take place or must be seen to have taken place. You got to, so this is why we talk about allegations. And until you do an investigation into these allegations and you would have validated that the allegations are now have been proven to be true, then out of that, you decide, you take whatever course of action that is necessary given the particular set of circumstances.
It is going to be useful when Ozzy Walker joins us at about 10 to or maybe 11 o'clock. When he joins us, we are going to raise exactly that area with him because they, in fairness, not in fairness, but I think the facts, as reported, is that they're asking for the removal of the CSO until the investigation is over. That is one part.
Well, I think that's just semantics until it's over, okay? It's very simple to say to the employer, this guy is the head of security. We are having an investigation and therefore you would have erred in having him sit in the investigation, investigating
or in
himself.
charge of it, yes.
In charge of it. Therefore, it's very easy to move him from there and get either an independent or someone else to sit into the new. So I know they probably would play in between there, you know, but at the end of the day, to take strike action for something that could have been resolved through greater levels of collaboration, my suspicion, and having been in the trade union movement, you know, sometimes you're in a leadership position and you want to do something and you use your perceived authority, to leverage a particular position. I rather suspect this is what has happened. And if you ask Comrade Roger now, quietly, he will say to you, you know, I erred.
Guys, it's not a text, it's a pretext. because the general feeling is there is a conflation of issues going on here, not the least of them being wage negotiations and better conditions, which was articulated but not featured. So that's a whole different revolution.
Rennie, if I might just add, one of the things that we have to always keep in mind is that when whatever role we are in, whether it's the union or the employer, Mr. Nancoo mentioned just now, remember, we are leaders right now. We are leaders, and how we treat with things, we are saying something to the younger persons coming on board. How are we treating with it? Is it always, okay, you have done this to me, you have done this. What they have done is not illegal, right? But is that the best response? And at the end of the day, we have to look at the larger picture, the interests, and what are we teaching the young persons who are coming up? How do you treat with conflict? Conflict is a natural thing once you have employees, because we are looking at conflicting and competing kinds of, right? But the answer cannot be taking the high road and running ahead and creating mischief and creating confusion. That's not in the best interest of the country and the economy as it is right now.
Where we are today, given the harsh economic realities. And this is why we need to, unless we are mad, unless we are crazy people, to just sit by and say, well, whatever happens, happens.
Very important observation, Joycelyn, and you in concurrence with it, because at the end of the day, how the adults handle conflict is how kids see it. Yes. And the whole question of talking about a violent society and acting oblivious of the implications of the confrontation that they see of the way that you are dealing with your varying positions is something that they're going to internalize, and it will manifest manifest itself.
And that's
if it's not
important,
manifesting itself right now.
Yeah, Rennie, for us, ECA, I think that is a really important role. And I think sometimes it's misunderstood, where even our employers, our members, they get upset with us. They get upset with us because we do not condone some of the, let me quote unquote, wrong practices or actions and responses, right? And we are not here to condone necessarily what our employers do. In fact, we train them. We bring them in. We have a lot of programs. We train them in terms of convention and what is the right thing in terms of labor, international labor, what is accepted. So we are saying we have to do this thing right. And it goes down, again, we go back to the society, the nation that we are all talking about, that we need to save, that we need to rebuild. Yes, we have to take actions that may not be what we have done in the past, but it's what internationally
it cannot
is being
be
done.
what we have done in the past.
Conflict
the climate has been
resolution.
said before has not worked. November 11th, in conclusion, November 11th is the seminar, the symposium at the Hyatt Regency. That starts at 8 o'clock, 8:30 in the morning. Call it 7 o'clock if you want to get them there on time. And then phase 2 of that will be January 27th at, where is this? At the ES?
It is actually, the second part will take place at the ESC.
Yes,
training. And the second part, let me just say as well, would be a little more practical. So people, employers, their HR managers, etc., would be leaving with practical tools on how to vet your IR advice, as an example. And even looking at the whole strategic HR, because of course
human resources.
Human resources, sorry. If you do not invest in your HR, systems and all of that, and ensure that your managers are strategic, a part of that strategic planning, the result is that you will end up with a lot of IR issues.
Keston, you get the final word.
Sure. I just want to leave the audience with this. We cannot hope to achieve excellence in a sea of community indifference.
Touché. Telephone number, I like it too. Telephone number where folks who would like to attend this the symposium. The telephone numbers are what?
675-9388.
675-9388. All right, that's the number. I want to thank you both. Keston Nancoo, who is the director of the Employers Consultative Association, and Joycelyn Opadeyi, who is the CEO of the organization. I actually got the title right this time. I have promoted her and done a whole lot of strange things before.
I got the name right also.
Well, that's all right, Keith. I'm sorry, Keston.
Today was a day for getting it right.
You both have a wonderful day. And thank you so much for coming. The telephone number again is 675-9388. It is November 11th at Hyatt and January 27th. Retooling organizations for the future. Very important as the nation come together for what I think is best described as a reconstruction and a recommitment. Thank you all so much for being here this morning.